Hey guys, welcome to your very first video. This is your Chapter 1, Section 1, Science and Scientist video. Notice here on the screen we have our bell ringer here. Our bell ringer is going to be what you're going to do every day. As a matter of fact, you're going to answer the bell ringer on Edmodo. That way, we have a class discussion over what we think of the bell ringer for that lesson, for that video. So we'll have the bell ringer going, and you'll answer those questions. Alrighty? So let's go ahead and get started. Next up, you'll see the objectives. So today's lesson, we're going to talk about the 3 methods of investigation. We're going to identify the benefits of science in the world around you. And we're going to describe some jobs that use science. Now, there is going to be an additional video added that's going to have a couple interviews with some people who are scientists, but you may not think of them as scientists. Because they do use the scientific methods and engineering design process to create their jobs. So we'll be doing that, talking to them as well in the videos. Alrighty, have you ever sat there and wondered what makes the sun shine? I know nowadays you guys have been through science class and you guys have learned, about the ultraviolet lights from the sun, and you guys know about the green grass, why the grass is green. Have you ever thought about why the wind blows? Have you ever thought about, why is the sky blue, the clouds form, those things? If you've thought of those things, you are a scientist. All right, because to be a scientist and the study of science is the process of gathering knowledge about the natural world. Right over here, guys. The natural world is what we're looking for. So to gather that knowledge, when we start looking at this, we have to ask a question. All right. The very first question, obviously, why is the trees green? If you look outside today, you probably see the trees are green. Why is that? All right. Well, when we first start asking questions, one of the things that we do is we start looking at our neighborhood. We start looking at the things around us, and we start looking, because we're more concerned, face it, we're more concerned about ourselves than we are about everybody else. So we start looking at things that affect us personally. Why is the grass green? Why is the trees green? Why is the sky blue? Why do clouds form? How do we get wind? Those types of things. We look at that stuff at things that are affecting us and the world around us. And after we get done doing that, we start looking at other things, all right? We start looking at the world beyond us, and we start saying, we start looking at the deserts. What is a desert like? Now, we don't live in a desert. We live in a deciduous forest, although the coniferous forest is taking over because of the logging companies. But we live in a deciduous forest, and we don't really know what a desert's like unless you've been there. So how do we know what that's like? So by using science and studying those different things, we can see what exactly the desert environment, the desert ecosystem is like. All right, looking at forests or looking at beaches and those types of things, we can look at the types of animals that are there. We can look at the types of plants that live there and why those animals live there instead of in other climates, instead of other areas. We look at those types of things. So then we look at the earth. We start off with just us. Then we look at the earth around us. And then we decide to look further than that. All right? And eventually it takes us out into the cosmos. We start looking at the stars, the constellations, the planets, and we start saying, why are those things formed the way they are? How do we know how far away those things are? How does the light get to us and the stars and those types of things? And how, are we really the center of the universe, or is the sun the center of the universe? And how do we get that information? Because we study science. Because scientists look at that stuff, they ask those questions, they look at that stuff and say, okay, what exactly is science? How do those things happen? All right. So we start off by asking that, that question. Once that question is asked, we have to do something with that question. All right. And so when we do something with that question, we are basically conducting an investigation. Now, all scientists and almost all jobs really start off this way. All right, my job, even as a mechanic, it doesn't matter if you're a mechanic, it doesn't matter if you are, a scientist in a lab someplace, doesn't matter where you are. You start off with these 3 things. These are the things that you do to create an investigation, because that investigation is the answer to the question. All right. So how do we answer that question? Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is you have to research. So is there information out there already about why the trees are green? All right. Is there information out there why the car is not starting? Is there information out there about how does a bacteria grow? So the first thing we have to do is we have to research. All right, so we go out, we research our topic, the ideas that we have, the questions that we have. We start trying to research for answers to that. Once we get done with the research portion, we start looking at the observation. We start observing very carefully what exactly is happening. So when the trees were brown at the beginning of winter, or at the very beginning of spring, the trees don't have leaves on them, and the grass is brown. And then we start carefully watching why all of a sudden do those trees and that grass go from being brown to being green, and then the flowers start blooming on them. We start making careful observations that this stuff is happening, and it's happening at specific times throughout the year. So we have to make those careful observations. It isn't just a casual, oh look, the grass is green today, or the trees are green today, or there's a flower today. No, we have to make careful observations over what exactly is happening. Next, we have to do experiments. All right, that would be the last step of the investigation, is you actually experiment. Now, most of us probably think that in an investigation that you'll jump straight to the experiment and continue from there, but that's not it. All right, in reality, you have to go through the research phase, you have to go through the observation phase, and you have to go through the experimentation phase to get your answers to your questions. Okay, so when we get the answer to our questions, then we have an answer to those different things. Now, why? Why do that? Why even ask questions? You know, I know some of you guys like to ask questions in class of me because you guys like to try and get me off track and that kind of stuff. And you do that with all teachers because the teachers are fun to get off track, because if they get off track, you know, you don't have to spend as much time listening to them talk about whatever it happens to be. But in science, there are serious reasons and serious repercussions as to why we ask questions. Well, first off and foremost is to save lives, guys. We do that because we ask questions on how we can save lives. For example, seatbelts in cars. And I know some of you guys probably don't like to wear it, but it's been a proven fact that if you wear a seatbelt in a car, you are more likely to survive. Now, granted, I didn't say that you would survive and you would be injury-free, but you are more likely to survive in a car if you have that safety seatbelt. Same thing with the glass in our cars. The glasses in our cars today are tempered glass. They don't shatter just like a window in your house would. They kind of break and spread that shatter throughout the whole windshield, so it doesn't come in on you and cut you with the flying glass and stuff. So we do it first off. Scientists do it first off to save lives. They try to look at ways that we can save lives. Next would be to save resources. All right. So the next step is, you know, we only have a limited number of non-renewable resources. And we really, even though there are renewable resources, we still need to be able to be conscientious and be able to save and reserve the amount of use of those resources that we have, so that is there for future generations. But we look at coal. How can we use coal more efficiently, or use less coal? How can we produce power without coal, like using electric power, or using hydroelectric power plants, using nuclear power plants, using wind energy, using solar energy? So scientists help come up with those ideas, so that way we can save our natural resources as well, so that those things are there for our future generations. And another reason that we ask questions, or scientists ask questions, is, save the environment. How many people like to drive around when you go down riding in the Gulf? How many guys like to go down there and see garbage everywhere? How many guys like to go down there and see the environment totally wrecked and destroyed? No one likes to see that, but it happens a little bit at a time. So scientists help us find ways to protect our environment as well. They make the world a healthier place, so we can find ways of eliminating trash, and we can find ways of recycling the garbage, because, face it, when you throw something away into your garbage can, it has to go somewhere. Where does it go? Well, as far as you're concerned, it probably goes from your house to the dump. From the dump, where does it go? Well, it has to go someplace. They have to go and dump it into a recycling facility, or dump it into a landfill. Well, that landfill is taking up precious land that we could, number one, we could build houses on. Number two, we could use to build businesses on. Number three, we could have used that land for a park. Number four, we could have used that land for farming. Number five, we could have used that land just to leave it natural, so we could go hunting and stuff there. So finding ways that we can help save our environment, reduce the amount of waste and stuff that we have, that's another job that scientists do. Now they get out there and they do all kinds of interesting things, and there's all kinds of different jobs that you could do if you were a scientist. And you may not even think that this is a scientist's job. One of those jobs would be a meteorologist. A meteorologist is someone who studies the weather. All right? All they do is they get on TV and they tell you, well, not all of them are on TV, but they get on TV and they tell you what the weather's going to be like today. Today it's going to be about 70 degrees. We're going to Gatlinburg today because it's an 8th grade class trip. Woohoo! But it'll be about 72, 74 degrees, something like that up there in Gatlinburg. It's going to be a beautiful day for us to be out there. Well, how do we know that? Meteorologists tell us. And how do meteorologists know that? They take all the models that they have, the mathematical models, and they do all their computations, and they come up with an idea of what the weather's going to be like. Based off of the readings we have today, plus looking at historically what the weather's like historically here, or in Gatlinburg. So those types of things, that's one job that you could do if you were a scientist. You could be a meteorologist. Another job that you could do if you were going to be a scientist would be a geochemist. Now, geochemists are people who study rocks, and they study the rocks, the minerals, the soil, those types of things. They study that to see, the changes in the environment over a long period of time. You can see what happened on the Earth's surface. You can see what happened in our environment by studying those different things. For example, if you find in your rocks, if you're studying your rocks and stuff, and you find a lot of sediment, then you know that maybe at one time, and especially if you find fossils of sea creatures, you see that at one time maybe all this land used to be underwater. But studying our minerals and studying our rocks and those types of things helps get a full picture of what the Earth used to look like. Another job would be an ecologist. An ecologist is someone who studies nature, and they study the community of those organisms, how they work together. What happens if one of those organisms is gone? All right. What happens if one of those organisms overproduces and there's too much of that one organism in an area? What happens to the environment? And ecologists, they study those effects, and they come up with plans to help us solve those issues. All right. Another job would be a volcanologist. Those are some people who go in and study volcanoes. All right. They get to wear those cool fire retardant, heat retardant suits and go close to as close as they can to those volcanoes and study what a volcano actually does and what the changes to the environment the volcano does. That's another job that you could do if you're going to be a scientist. There's also, and lastly, there's a science illustrator. All right, a science illustrator is somebody who, in their book, in your science books, they actually draw things. All right, those of you who like to be artists, you could be a science illustrator. You could draw things, draw birds and stuff, and the internal organ systems of birds, or the internal organ systems of humans, or of animals, and those types of things. There's always a demand by textbook companies and other type of people that look for science illustrators. These are people who are trained in art. They know how to draw well, and then they also have to be able to imprint in those body systems and stuff inside of an organism, or be able to draw a flower and stuff like that. As you go through your science book this year, and as you've gone through the 7th grade science book last year, you guys have seen a lot of the images that these science illustrators have done, and they do that to give you a better understanding. Because how many of you guys want me to cut open a body in front of you so I can show you all the organs of a person? Not going to happen. Those of you who think I would do that, you are crazy, because I'm not going to get all that blood all over me. But that's another job. And how do we know where those organs? How do we know that our heart's really right here? How many of you can see your heart right there? We can't. Well, those science illustrators know from studying anatomy and those types of things that our heart's right here, and so they can go ahead and draw your heart. What does your heart actually look like with the blood vessels and all that stuff? That is the thing that science illustrators can do. So, ladies and gentlemen, that basically wraps up section 1. Pretty good, pretty quick, pretty easy. See, this is a lesson that would have taken us a whole class period to teach. We got it done in 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, this will be a fun year. I'm excited for us. I'm very excited for the way that the class is going to run. I'm excited to see what we are going to learn, and I'm excited for us to see these videos. Now, this was just the first video. We have many more to come, 53 more videos to go. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And remember, I'll be seeing you in the future.